I still can't believe those words actually came out of my mouth. I mean, who even says that to their husband of 12 years? Apparently, me, Brittany Walsh, the girl who landed the most popular guy in high school, calling him a loser in the middle of Denny's while families were trying to enjoy their pancakes. I'm 32 now, but sometimes I still feel like that insecure 16-year-old who couldn't believe Kyle Peterson asked me to prom. Everything fell apart 3 weeks ago, and I'm still sitting in our half-empty house. Try to figure out how we got here. 1 minute, we were having breakfast at our usual spot, and the next, I was watching my husband walk out on me because I couldn't keep my foolish mouth shut. The worst part? A tiny piece of me still thinks I was right, even though I know what I said was cruel. Kyle and I have been together since junior year of high school. He was a Kyle Peterson quarterback, homecoming king, the guy every girl wanted and every guy wanted to be. I was just Brittany Miller back then, pretty enough, but nothing special. When he first noticed me in chemistry class, I nearly fainted. When he asked for my number a week later, I was convinced someone had put him up to it. But by Thanksgiving, I was wearing his Letterman jacket and sitting with his friends at lunch. Back then, Kyle was everything. His dad owned the local construction company, and everyone assumed Kyle would either play college football or take over the family business. Either way, his future looked golden. Meanwhile, I was smart but not outstanding, attractive but not beauty queen material. Being Kyle Peterson's girlfriend instantly gave me status. Our senior year was magical, until the Henderson game. I still flinched thinking about the sound when Kyle's knee twisted the wrong way under that linebacker. The stadium fell silent, and just like that, the scholarship offers vanished. After graduation, everyone expected Kyle to play college football or at least take some business classes at the community college. But he shocked everyone by joining a management training program at Halton's Hardware instead. He said he wanted to start making real money instead of wasting time in school. His dad knew the owner, so Kyle figured he'd be running the place in 5 years, tops. Meanwhile, I took night classes and worked my way up from receptionist to office manager at Pine Valley Dental. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, and Dr. Reeves gave me good raises. I always thought Kyle would eventually go back to school or find something better than Halton's, but the years kept slipping by. Fast forward to now, and Kyle is still at Halton's, just an assistant manager after all these years. Don't get me wrong, he works hard. He's never missed a day, does overtime whenever they offer it, and is the first person his boss calls when there's a problem. But his paychecks barely grow, and our little starter home in Oak Ridge no longer feels like a temporary place. I probably wouldn't have cared so much if Facebook hadn't dragged me back into everyone's lives. It started with our 10-year reunion last summer. I reconnected with all these people I hadn't thought about in years, and suddenly my feed was flooded with their incredible lives, vacation homes, European getaways, designer everything. It made our annual weekend at the lake seem pitiful. The worst part? Lindsay Mitchell. She was Lindsay Carter in high school. Sent me a friend request. We used to be close, but she went off to college, and we lost touch. Now, she's married to a guy named Brad who runs some big sales team for a tech company, and they just bought a stunning house in Meadow Heights. You know, the neighborhood with the gated entrance and man-made lake. At first, I scrolled through her profile casually. Then I started checking it daily. Then I started feeling this knot in my stomach every time she posted about their kitchen renovation or Brad's company retreat in Cancun. Meanwhile, I was trying to figure out if we could afford to fix our dishwasher that month or if we have to keep washing dishes by hand. Kyle never seemed fazed by any of it. He'd come home from work, kiss me hello, grab a beer, and start dinner or fix something around the house. He always talked about how we were doing fine, how we were better off than a lot of people, how at least we weren't drowning in debt like some of his co-workers. But fine started to feel like settling to me. Things might have stayed the same if Lindsay hadn't invited me to her housewarming party. That was the night everything really started to unravel. Kyle couldn't go because he had to cover a shift for someone, which was probably for the best. I drove to her neighborhood alone, feeling like a fraud in my 6-year-old Honda. The whole drive there, I rehearsed what I'd say when people asked about Kyle, making him sound more important at Halton's than he really was. Assistant regional manager instead of just assistant manager, on track for corporate instead of hoping for a raise. The lies were already forming before I even arrived. Lindsay's housewarming changed everything. Her home was breathtaking, marble countertops, a giant fridge with a built-in computer screen. The conversations were all about vacation homes, private schools, and investment portfolios. When Brad asked what Kyle did, I heard myself say, "He's in management at Halton's Hardware. They're grooming him for the corporate office." The lie slipped out so smoothly. "Retail's tough these days with online competition," Brad said sympathetically. "If he ever wants to explore other options, our company is always looking for guys with management experience." I took his business card and thanked him, knowing Kyle would never call. His first excuse would be the commute, followed by like what I do in those corporate jobs work you to death. When I got home that night, Kyle was in the backyard grilling chicken, looking so content it made me furious. He had no idea what we were missing out on. "How was the party?" he asked. "Fancy house, huh? Lindsay's husband must be making bank." "It was fine," I said. "Brad works for some tech company. Director of sales or something." Kyle nodded, completely uninterested. "Cool. Hey, Jameson at work told me they're finally giving me that raise next month. Extra $1.50 an hour. Figure we could put it toward fixing the bathroom sink. $1.50 an hour. While Brad was probably making six figures and buying second homes." I felt something bitter twist inside me. After Lindsay's party, I accepted her invitation to her lake house for a girls' weekend. I maxed out our emergency credit card on new clothes and highlights, so I wouldn't look like the charity case of the group. Kyle raised an eyebrow at the credit card statement, but didn't say much beyond quiet. "That's a lot for one weekend, Britt." The cabin turned out to be a massive timber home with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water, 5 bedrooms, a hot tub on the deck, a wine cellar. Lindsay called it their little getaway, like it was nothing. After too many glasses of wine, the conversation turned to husbands. Everyone was complaining. Brad works too much. Mike is obsessed with golf. Jason never helps with the kids. I sat there, realizing they had no idea what real disappointment felt like. "What about Kyle?" Lindsay asked. "Still the charmer he was in high school?" Before I could filter myself, I blurted out, "He's exactly the same as he was in high school. That's the problem." Instead of judgment, I got sympathy, which somehow felt worse. They made it sound so simple. Push him, challenge him, threaten to leave if he didn't step up. Like Kyle was some project I could fix rather than a person with his own values. I drove home Sunday night with my head full of advice and my heart full of determination. Kyle wasn't going to hold me back anymore. He was going to step up, or I was going to reconsider everything. Over the next few weeks, I made more pointed comments about Jason getting another promotion, about Brad's company looking for fresh talent, about how Lindsay never had to check prices at the grocery store. Then came the credit card bill with my weekend expenses. Kyle spread it out on the kitchen table one night, pointing to the total with a calmness that felt forced. "Britt, we can't keep doing this. These charges from the girls' weekend, the new clothes, we're going to be paying this off for months. Maybe if you made more money, it wouldn't be such a big deal." I shot back, immediately regretting the words, but too proud to take them back. Kyle's face went still. "I think we need to have a serious talk about our finances and what we want for the future. Let's go to Denny's Saturday morning, neutral territory." Saturday morning at Denny's started off normally. It was our usual spot where we'd gone for weekend breakfast since before we were married. Our waitress, Doreen, knew our orders by heart. Kyle came prepared, which should have been my first warning sign. He had a folder with neatly organized papers. I'd never seen Kyle organize anything except his fantasy football lineup. "I've been thinking about our finances," he started. "If we cut back on non-essentials for the next 6 months, we could save enough of that kitchen update you wanted. Maybe next year, we could take a real vacation, not Europe, but maybe Florida or even Mexico." He looked so proud of himself. All I could think was that Lindsay and Brad wouldn't need to save for 6 months to update a kitchen. "I also applied for the manager position," Kyle continued. "Frank's retiring in December, and I've been there longer than anyone else. It would mean about $3 more an hour, plus better benefits." $3 an hour. That was his big solution? $3 more at the same hardware store he'd been at for a decade? And what does that mean for us in the big picture? I asked, are we still going to be in the same house 5 years from now? Still taking one weekend trip a year, while everyone else is living their best lives? Kyle's expression shifted. What's wrong with our house? We've put a lot of work into it. And who's everyone else? Your friends from the lake house. Yes, Kyle. People like Lindsay and Brad, who have actual careers in nice things and don't have to budget for 6 months to replace a kitchen faucet. Those people probably have massive debt, Kyle countered. We've built what we have on our own, and we've done it the right way, debt-free except for the mortgage. The plan, I repeated, feeling something ugly rising in my throat. Your grand plan for us to be comfortable and boring and small for the rest of our lives? His face darkened. I didn't realize you were so unhappy with what we built together. Built? What have we built, Kyle? A house barely bigger than our first apartment? A life where a $3 raise is cause for celebration? When did you decide mediocrity was enough? People were staring now, but I couldn't stop myself. Years of resentment poured out. I've stuck by you through everything. I believed in you when no one else did after your injury. I worked my ass off to advance my career while you've been coasting. And for what? So we can pinch pennies and pretend we're happy with less than we deserve. Kyle's face had gone pale. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet I had to lean in to hear him. Is that really what you think of me? That I'm some kind of failure? I should have stopped, should have taken a breath. But all I could see was a life I thought I deserved slipping away. You're just a loser who peaked in high school, I said. The words cut through the diner noise like a knife. Kyle's face got his face. In 12 years of marriage, I'd never seen him look like that, like I'd physically struck him. He didn't yell, didn't cause a scene. He just carefully gathered his papers, slid them back into the folder, and placed a $20 bill on the table. Then he looked at me with those dead eyes and said, I think we're done here. I sat there for another 20 minutes, waiting for him to come back. When he didn't, I finally paid the bill and drove home, rehearsing a half apology in my head. I'd been too harsh, but he needed to hear it. We could work through this. Except when I got home, Kyle was methodically packing a duffel bag, not in a rage, but with the same steady focus he applied to everything. Kyle, come on. I'm sorry I said that. Let's talk about this like adults. He didn't even look up. I think you said exactly what you meant, Brittany. And I think I finally heard you. I don't think you're a loser, I insisted, panic rising as I realized how badly I'd wounded him. No, Kyle said, zipping the bag closed. You want more for yourself, and you decided I'm what's holding you back. He picked up the bag and moved past me toward the door. I grabbed his arm, suddenly terrified. Where are you going? You can't just leave. I'm going to stay with my brother for a while. I need space to think about everything. And then he was gone. The first week without Kyle was strange. Part of me kept expecting him to come back, to call and say he'd calmed down. But this time, silence. No calls, no texts, not even a response when I sent a casual, hey, on day 3. By day 10, I drove past Halton's Hardware during my lunch break, catching a glimpse of Kyle helping an elderly customer load bags of mulch into a car. He looked fine, not devastated, not heartbroken, just going about his job like nothing had changed. That night, I broke down and called Lindsay, spilling the whole ugly story through tears. I expected sympathy, validation that Kyle was being unreasonable. Instead, her response floored me. Whoa, Brittany, you actually said that to him at Denny's? That's brutal. Lindsay sighed. Look, I know I post a lot about our house and trips and stuff, but it's not all sunshine. Brad works 70-hour weeks. He's missed birthdays, anniversaries. We fight about money all the time. Kyle always seemed like a good guy who was present for you. The next morning, I checked our joint account and found the balance half of what it should be. $5,000 gone. Kyle had taken exactly half of our savings. I called him immediately. Kyle, there's $5,000 missing from our account. Did you take it? I took my half, yes. I needed to get my own place, and I figured half the savings was fair. Your own place? For how long? I've been doing a lot of thinking, Britt. About us. About what you said. And I think you were right about one thing. I've been coasting. But not anymore. He wasn't asking for any of my retirement funds. Just his 401k, his truck, his tools, and a fresh start. I bumped into Kyle's brother, Mark, at the grocery store, and the glare he gave me was icy enough to freeze hell over. You know, he said, his tone sharp. My brother worked overtime every single weekend for 3 months to buy you that bracelet for your anniversary last year. The one you said was thoughtful, but never actually wore, because it wasn't from some high-end boutique. I had completely forgotten about the bracelet. Sterling silver, embedded with delicate blue gemstones that mirrored my eyes. I had thanked Kyle at the time, but had tucked it away in my jewelry box, disappointed that it wasn't the white gold one I had been hinting at for months. Kyle's thriving without you weighing him down, Mark continued, his words like daggers. He got that promotion, and he's taking business management classes at the community college. Stuff he's wanted to do for years but never did, because you made him feel foolish for even trying. The final blow landed when I found out Kyle was dating someone new, Jason's sister from that lake house weekend. Barely 2 months had passed, and he had already moved on, while I was still tossing and turning in an empty bed. I saw Kyle yesterday. My friend Megan told me over the phone. He looked happy, confident. He was talking about his classes, his plans for the hardware store. He seemed like a completely different person. After Megan's call, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset spill over the fence Kyle had built by hand 3 summers ago. Mark's words echoed in my mind, how Kyle had always wanted to take classes but felt too inadequate to try. I thought about the bracelet I had dismissed, never realizing the sacrifice it symbolized. Then the truth hit me like a physical force. Kyle had always had dreams and ambitions. They just weren't the ones I wanted for him. They weren't grand enough to post about online, weren't the kind that would make Lindsay and her friends envious. But they were real and they mattered to him, and I had stomped all over them with my obsession for designer label aspirations. That night, I signed the final divorce papers without contesting a single thing. Later, I found myself scrolling through old photos, landing on one from our wedding day. Kyle was gazing at me with such pure adoration that it made my chest tighten. I couldn't even remember the last time I had looked at him with anything close to that. The thing about realizations is they come too late. They show up after the damage is done, after the words have already been said, after the person you hurt has gathered their broken pieces and moved on without you, and they leave you sitting alone in a house that suddenly feels too empty, scrolling through snapshots of a life you never appreciated until it was gone. I'd love to say I learned my lesson, that losing Kyle transformed me into a better person. But the truth is Messier. I still feel a pang of regret when I see Lindsay's post about their vacation in Italy. I still catch myself thinking, that could have been me, when I see happy couples in luxury cars. The difference is, now I know those thoughts are poison. They cost me something real in exchange for something artificial. Too bad I had to throw away a marriage to realize it. Too bad Kyle had to leave and take his 401k with him for me to finally understand what I had lost.